Hello and welcome to my Yugioh channel. Today we're looking at the new cards which are coming from the jurrac archetype, and these have been featured in Terminal World 2. It is a level 1 fire attribute dinosaur type tuner effect monster. It's got 500 attack and 1300 defense. You can only use the first, second and third effect of this card's name each once per turn. 1. If you control a dinosaur monster, you can stress summon this card from your hand. 2. During your main phase, you can discard 2 cards including a jurrac card, then draw 2 cards. And 3. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can send up 1 jurrac monster from your deck or etch deck to the graveyard except jurrac Megalite. The first ability of this card is, firstly, it's a tuner monster, so that's necessary for the archetype. As the more tuners they get, they need upgrades to their existing tuner list. And as soon as you have a dinosaur monster, you're instantly able to special summon this card. It means you can go into a synchro play pretty much on the same turn. Second ability lets you, during the main phase, just discard 2 cards, provided at least one of them is a jurrac card, and then you get to draw 2 cards. It's nice, this is a consistent Pot of Greed style of effect, but the only thing is that it's pretty much a net zero, as unless you're getting it and the discard having effects in the graveyard to bring those cards out or to have additional effects, it's not necessarily that good, especially if your opponent is able to negate the effect, as you still have to pay the cost, you just don't get the bonus of those 2 drawn cards. This is quite devastating with cards such as Ash Blossom and Winter Cherries, as that will just negate that type of ability. Third effect, if this card happens to be destroyed by battle or card effect, you're able to send a jurrac monster from your deck or etch deck to the graveyard. Not necessarily understanding the reasoning behind that, as most of the jurracs don't have any sort of recursion. I know some of the boss monsters, I think Titano isn't able to be special summoned. It has to be summoned through tribute summon, and that requires 2 monsters to bring it out. Therefore, it's not necessarily that great, but I'm sure there's some implication as to why that has been put as part of the effect. This card is named after the Megalosaurus, the first named dinosaur, so that's just a bit of trivia for it. Jurrac Stigo is a level 4 fire attribute dinosaur type effect monster. It has 1700 attack and 900 defense. You can only use the first effect of this card's name once per turn. 1. During your main phase, you can destroy 1 card you control, and if you do, send 1 dinosaur monster from your deck to the graveyard. Then you can special summon any number of jurrac monsters from your hand and or deck, whose total levels equal the sent monster's level, ignoring their summoning conditions, except Jurrac Stigo. Also, you can special summon for the rest of this turn, except dinosaur monsters. 2. When this card is destroyed by battle, you can return 1 card on the field to the hand. That's quite interesting. Jurrac Stigo is one of their monsters. This is actually a decent one. 1700 tends to be the standard for most of the level 4 monsters that don't happen to be tuner monsters. You've got Jurrac Dino, you have Jurrac Guaiba, there are other examples. Most have this same attack points for just thematic reasons. During the main phase, you are able to destroy a card you control. That's perfect, as the baby Cerosaurus and the Pterosaurus, both the babies, when they're destroyed by a card effect, they have abilities to let you special summon into various dinosaur type cards, and provided you do this, you're able to send a dinosaur monster from your deck to the graveyard. That's fine, and then you can special summon any number of jurrac monsters from your hand or deck, whose total levels equal the sent monster's level, ignoring their summoning conditions. This is a good way of you bringing out the Jurrac Titano, as I mentioned before. That's a level 9. Provided you can reach that limit, you've got really a couple of options you can go for. You can either choose to kind of swarm your field and bring out some lower level monsters, or you can condense your field by really just bringing out a 1 single high level monster. This does have more flexibility to it, as it has to destroy a card you control and a dinosaur monster from your deck to the graveyard. So if you can destroy some of the higher level dinosaur monsters, say a level 10 or even a level 12, you are able to bring out potentially multiple decent sized heavy hitters to your field. And since it has that effect of ignoring summoning conditions, there isn't any restrictions for it. Only thing is, once you use this type of effect, you are locked into dinosaur monsters for the rest of this turn, but that is again not an issue. Second ability, as soon as this card has to be destroyed by battle, you can return 1 card on the field to the hand. This is a good form of disrupting your opponent, as it has some restrictions as to what they can do. It says here that despite the spelling, this card is indeed named after Stegosaurus, and I don't know whether it's just a shortened version, Stego, that type of emphasis, but I suppose that's just how they've decided to name it. Whether we get that as the same name in the TCG, it's most likely going to be changed. Jurrac Astero is a level 10 fire attribute dinosaur type synchro effect monster. It has 2500 attack and 2300 defense. It requires a tuner and 1 non-tuner dinosaur monsters. 1. If this card is synchro summoned, you can set 1 Jurrac spell or trap card from your deck or graveyard. 2. Once per turn, if your opponent would special summon a monster, as a quick effect, you can banish 2 dinosaur monsters from your graveyard, negate the summon, and if you do, destroy that monster. And 3. During the opponent's turn, as a quick effect, you can banish 2 Jurrac monsters from your graveyard, including this card, special summon 1 Jurrac meteor from your X deck. This is treated as a synchro summon. The summoning on this card is pretty difficult, as it does consider itself a level 10 monster. Not necessarily understanding why it's a level 10. For me, stat-wise, it looks more like a level 7, potentially level 8 if I'm being generous, but we'll have to see why. The tuner is actually generic, so you can actually run various other tuners, and there are actually other tuners in the game that happen to have decent effects that can splash into just most types of decks with their own effect. But they do need 1 or more non-tuner dinosaur monsters, so it has to be run within some form of dinosaur type deck. First ability, as soon as this is synchro summoned, you can set a Jurrac spell or trap card from your deck or graveyard. As far as I remember, I think we have Jurrac Impact is the only trap card, and by attributing a monster that you have that has 2500 or more attack points, then it can wipe out your opponent's cards. I think it wipes out the field. That's its general idea. Second ability, once per turn, provide your opponent special summons a monster as a quick effect. Just by banishing 2 dinosaur monsters from your graveyard, you can negate the summon and destroy that monster. That's quite useful, as it can not only disrupt what your opponent's planning on playing, but if it's part of going into other monsters, then its negation can be quite devastating for you. It only costs you banishing 2 dinosaur monsters from your graveyard, which can really be fueled from the effect of the tuner monster by bringing those cards out, as well as the Jurrac Stigo. The only downside I'd say for this is your opponent is going to be trying to whittle down your graveyard to a point where you can't use these types of effects. And also, if you don't have the desired recovery, you may be getting rid of cards for the sake of your opponent trying to bait you out. So that's also a problem. Third ability, provided during your opponent's turn, you're able to banish 2 Jurrac monsters from your graveyard, including this card, to special summon a Jurrac meteor from your X deck. This is a mass clearance type of effect, as the Jurrac meteor just wipes out all cards on the field, hence the name Meteor. It is pretty much designed as soon as it's synchro summoned, but this also says that is considered a synchro summon to just wipe out everything. So you're able to do this not only during negating your opponent's cards' summonings, but actually disrupting your opponent whenever they try and do anything. Which is also why the Jurrac Meteor has gone up quite significantly in price. But I don't understand that, as with the Jurrac Meteor, it's most likely going to be a reprint somewhere within the set. As with Jurrac Meteor, this card is simply named after a cosmic body. Okay, in this case, an asteroid, so asteroid. Notably, a meteor is the visible passage of an asteroid entering the atmosphere, so that's where the connection of the 2 names are given. Jurrac Volcano is a field spell card. Of course, most archetypes, when they are brought out, they're not brought out purely as their own, they're brought with their own dedicated field spell. This one is, you can only use the first, second, and third effect of this card's name each once per turn, so that's a hard effect. The one is, during your main phase, you can destroy 1 dinosaur monster you control, and if you do, special summon 1 Jurrac monster from your deck. 2. If your opponent special summons a monster during the turn they activated monster effects 4 or more times, you can special summon 1 Jurrac meteor from your X deck. This is treated as a synchro summon. And 3. If a Jurrac monster you control would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish 1 dinosaur monster from your graveyard instead. The first ability lets you, during the main phase, just destroy a dinosaur monster you control, and then replace it with a Jurrac monster from your deck. That's perfectly reasonable, as it's a way of sending one thing to bring out another thing, but it doesn't ignore the summoning conditions, so you aren't able to bring out the Titano, which is the highest level monster they have outside of the synchro monsters, but that's fine, you still have decent pairings with other cards. Second ability, provide your opponent special summons a monster and they've activated monster effects 4 or more times, you can bring out the Jurrac Meteor and that'll just destroy the board. That's a good way of clearing your opponent's cards, and if your opponent isn't pretty much familiar with how this deck works, then that's also going to work against them. I would say the problem with this card is that your opponent is most likely not going to activate monster effects that many times, knowing this card is already on the field, if they have any idea of how this deck operates. And since this is a new deck that's coming out, at least released with the new support, they're going to be quite critical on anyone playing this card, and will often target this card first, get rid of it, before ever actually going into those monster effects, or they will go into certain monsters that happen to have destruction-based effects first, and then hopefully extend. So they're just changing the way they're designing how they structure their extra decks, and how they go into some of their higher monsters afterwards. It's just kind of rethinking, resetting how you operate a deck. Such examples will be, I think one of the Nightmare monsters, the Nightmare Phoenix, has that ability by discarding a card from the hand. You can destroy a spell or trap card on the field. It just needs 2 effect monsters. And the other example I can think of is the Tornado Dragon. Given that's quite generic and most decks like to run level 4 monsters, pretty easy to bring out. Third ability, provided a jurrac monster you control would be destroyed by a card effect, you can just banish a dinosaur monster from your graveyard instead. This provides a decent effect protection for your jurrac meteor, as it prevents itself from being destroyed by simply removing another dinosaur monster from your graveyard. So it's very much... I love the design on how this works. It's not trying to take away from the Jurrac Meteor, which is their boss monster. It's a heavy defensive monster, but it's trying to incorporate everything around that monster, and it's just making things more accessible. They have a list of different support cards. These are all the Jurrac cards that you'll get reprints of. As you can see, Jurrac Meteor's up there, and don't understand why people want like the original version of those. I will have all of the Jurrac cards actually in forms of shorts and clips, so you can also see what the effects of those cards are and generally get a sense of how those decks like to interact. You'll find those all in the description down below. I'll put those as a full listing so you can watch at your viewing pleasure. Make sure to like the video. I really think it helps support the channel. I would also like to know which of these cards is your favourite. For me, I'm going to say I actually really like the Synchro Monster. I think it's pretty decent for what you need to be. It has some sort of negation effects, and bear in mind that the dinosaurs also have access to Lagia, Delca, and now the Lazar, which is the rank 6 one. You have more ways of bringing these kind of cards out and being able to disrupt your opponent without having to rely on generic forms of support. I would say there isn't any actual downsides to any of these cards. I think they're all useful, so I really struggle to find any weakness of them. I'd love to know what you guys have in the feedback in the comments below. As well, please watch some of the other videos. I will have my Jurrac review, which is the previous review before this support, and that'll be linked in the end screen. Thank you.